The Velthari aliens banned boredom across 400 star systems. Every species complied. Every species except one. Commander Dale Mercer sat alone in an empty holding cell. No tools, no weapons, no orders, just silence, and a stubby piece of chalk someone had left behind. He started writing equations on the wall. 3 days later, the most powerful alien empire in the known galaxy was on its knees, and the Velthari aliens still didn't understand what had hit them. If you've ever wondered what happens when you give a bored human too much time to think, hit that like button, subscribe to HFY Endurance Tales, and drop a comment telling us, what would you do with infinite time and a piece of chalk? Because this story, it's about to change everything you thought you knew about power in this galaxy. Buckle in, this journey starts now, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single stop. The Velthari aliens had ruled the known galaxy for 6,000 years. Not through brute force alone, though they had plenty of that. Not through superior technology alone, though their ships could crack a moon's crust from orbit. The Velthari aliens ruled because they had solved the oldest problem in civilized society, the problem of the idle mind. 6,000 years ago, the Velthari aliens' greatest philosophers had uncovered what they called the fracture theorem. It was simple, brutal, and completely true. Any sapient species, left without stimulation, would begin to question. Any species that questioned long enough would begin to resist. Any species that resisted long enough would eventually rebel. Boredom, they concluded, was not a personal inconvenience. It was a political weapon. It was the slow fuse on every revolution that had ever torn an empire apart. So the Velthari aliens outlawed it. The continuous engagement mandate, known across 2,000 inhabited worlds simply as the Mandate, was the most comprehensive social engineering project in galactic history. Every Velthari alien world was flooded with what they called Velth Stream, a constant, low-frequency neural signal broadcast from orbital platforms that kept every registered citizen's mind humming at a gentle, productive baseline. Not controlled, not enslaved, just occupied. Always slightly engaged, always slightly stimulated. Like the feeling of background music in a room, except the music was beamed directly into your neurons and never ever stopped. It worked beautifully. The Velthari alien subject species, the Inari aliens, the Dross aliens, the Peluvian aliens, the six-limbed Reth aliens of the outer spiral, all fell into comfortable, productive compliance. Crime dropped. Revolution stopped. The Velth stream hummed. And the galaxy was peaceful. And the Velthari alien sat at the center of it all like a spider in a web made of invisible sound. For 6,000 years, not a single species had resisted the mandate. Then humanity applied for membership. Earth's first contact with the Velthari aliens had been cautious, diplomatic, almost embarrassingly polite. Humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, learning alien linguistics, studying interstellar law, training diplomats who could smile through 18 hours of Velthari alien bureaucratic ritual without blinking. When Commander Dale Mercer's diplomatic vessel, the USS Resolute, finally docked at Velthari Station Prime, the Velthari aliens had greeted humanity with something that passed for warmth in their culture, a formal acknowledgement and a detailed orientation package about life under the mandate. The Velth Stream installation on Earth, the Velthari aliens explained, would take approximately 6 months. In the meantime, human representatives were welcome to tour Dominion space, observe mandate life, and acclimatize to galactic civilization. Dale had spent those 6 months watching. He was not an excitable man. At 43, he had the kind of face that had seen too many congressional hearings and not enough sunrises. Lean, weathered, with gray creeping into his dark hair at the temples. He had commanded 3 deep space research stations before this assignment. He was the kind of person who read technical manuals for fun on long shifts. His crew called him the calculator, not as an insult, but because when Dale Mercer looked at a problem, he didn't see drama, he saw variables. And what he saw in Dominion space troubled him deeply. The alien species under the mandate were not unhappy. That was the unsettling part. They were comfortable, productive, socially stable. But there was something missing in their eyes, something Dale recognized only because he had spent enough time in sensory deprivation tanks during military training to know what a mind looked like when it had been gently, permanently redirected away from its own depths. They never sat still. Not once in 6 months of travel across 14 Velthari alien worlds did Dale see a single alien citizen simply stop, sit quietly, stare at a wall, let their mind wander. The Velth stream kept them perpetually skimming the surface of their own consciousness, engaged, occupied, never quite diving deep enough to ask the questions that lived at the bottom. Dale mentioned this to his science officer, Dr. Kevin Rhodes, one evening over a meal of reconstituted Earth rations that tasted aggressively of home. The Velthari aliens never let their people get bored, Dale said, watching a group of Inari aliens across the station plaza, each one occupied with some task, some device, some soft glow of Velth stream entertainment. Not ever. Kevin looked up from his meal. Sounds like paradise. Sounds like a cage, Dale said quietly. Kevin was quiet for a moment, then, "You think the Velth stream is going to be a problem for us?" Dale picked up his fork. "I think," he said carefully, "that whoever designed that system has never spent 20 minutes alone with a bored human being." He had no idea in that moment how precisely correct he was. The Velthari aliens' formal assessment of humanity came 3 weeks later. Dale was summoned to a meeting with High Coordinator Vel Sareth, a towering Velthari alien 7 feet of pale blue exoskeletal authority, who delivered humanity's integration report with the smooth confidence of someone announcing routine maintenance. Humans, the report concluded, were biologically unusual. Their neural architecture showed an anomalous capacity for what the Velthari aliens classified as void tolerance, the ability to function and apparently even flourish in conditions of near-zero external stimulation. This was noted as a curiosity, a minor biological quirk, something to be corrected by the Velth stream once installation was complete. "Your species experiences an unusually high baseline of what we term cognitive self-generation," Vel Sareth told Dale, her 4 pale eyes calm and clinical. "Your minds produce their own stimulation when external sources are unavailable. It is an inefficient system. The mandate will correct it." Dale looked at her for a long moment. "With respect, High Coordinator," he said, "I'd like to see you try." Vel Sareth tilted her head, the Velthari alien gesture for polite confusion. She made a note in her report. "Human representative displays unusual confidence, possibly a cultural artifact. Monitor." She did not yet understand that she had just made the most expensive clerical error in galactic history. Back aboard the USS Resolute, Dale called his senior staff together. Around the briefing table sat the 5 people he trusted most in the known universe. Dr. Kevin Rhodes, science officer, and the only man Dale knew who could fall asleep reading quantum field theory and wake up with new ideas. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, chief engineer, who had once fixed a failing reactor with a paperclip and what he described as aggressive optimism. Captain Nathan Cole, tactical officer, built like a linebacker and sharp as a razor. Dr. Aaron Finch, xenolinguist, who had learned 3 alien languages in 4 months, and complained they weren't complex enough. And specialist Ryan Garrett, communications, who was 26 years old and had already filed 14 patents. Dale placed the Velthari aliens' assessment report on the table. "They think boredom is a malfunction," he said. "They're going to install a signal on Earth that keeps our brains permanently occupied. Low level, subtle. They've done it to every species in this galaxy." The room was quiet. Marcus Webb leaned forward. "And if we say no?" "We don't get to say no," Dale said. "Membership in the Dominion is non-negotiable." "The Velth stream comes with the package." Nathan Cole's jaw tightened. "So what do we do?" Dale looked at the report for a long moment. Then he looked up. "We study them," he said. "Everything. Their biology, their technology, their neural architecture, their signal systems. We learn exactly how the Velth stream works. And then," he paused, "then we find out what happens when you point a boredom weapon at the one species in the galaxy that runs on boredom." Ryan Garrett grinned. "That sounds like math." "That," Dale said, "is exactly what it sounds like." None of them slept much that night. Not because they were worried, because their minds were already moving, already turning the problem over, already finding edges and angles and possibilities in the dark. The Velthari aliens had outlawed boredom to stop revolutions. They had never considered that some species didn't need boredom to start one. They had never considered what a human does when given a problem, a deadline, and nothing else to do. The Velth stream Dale learned, was elegant. That was the frustrating part. He had expected something crude, a blunt instrument, a broadcast hammer. What the Velthari aliens had built instead was a masterpiece of biological engineering. 6,000 years in the refinement, tuned to the neural frequencies of dozens of different alien species with the precision of a concert musician tuning individual strings. Dr. Kevin Rhodes spent 3 weeks buried in the technical specifications the Velthari aliens had provided. Cheerfully, openly, because it had never once occurred to them that a species might study the Velth stream in order to fight it. Kevin emerged from his research looking like a man who had not seen sunlight in recent memory, with 17 pages of handwritten notes and an expression caught somewhere between horror and admiration. "It doesn't control thought," Kevin told Dale, spreading his notes across the briefing table. "That's the genius of it. It doesn't tell you what to think. It just makes sure you're always thinking about something. Always engaged. It's like, imagine you're trying to sit quietly in a room and think, but there's always a fly buzzing somewhere. You can never quite get deep enough to question things," Dale finished. "To question things," Kevin agreed. "Or to get bored enough to start doing something dangerous. Like math," Ryan Garrett said from the corner, not looking up from the equation he was sketching on a notepad. Everyone looked at him. Ryan looked up. "What? I'm bored right now. I've been doing differential geometry for fun. Do you want to see what I found?" Dale looked at Kevin. Kevin looked at Dale. "Actually," Dale said slowly, yes I do." What Ryan had found, purely out of boredom, purely because his hands needed something to do while he listened to Kevin's briefing, was a mathematical pattern embedded in the Velth stream's broadcast frequency, a harmonic artifact of the signal's 6,000-year evolution, like a crack that had slowly worked its way through a cathedral wall, invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for structural failures. "The signal resonates," Ryan explained, drawing on the notepad with the focused energy of someone who had forgotten to eat lunch. "At this frequency, right here, it creates a feedback loop in the receiver's neural network. The Velthari aliens tuned it out because their own architecture doesn't amplify the loop. But look what happens if you introduce a secondary signal at exactly this harmonic interval." He wrote the equation. Kevin stared at it. His face went very still. "Ryan," he said carefully, "do you understand what that would do to a Velthari alien neural network?" Ryan looked at his own equation. "Huh," he said. Yeah, I guess I do." Dale leaned over the table and studied the numbers. He was not a mathematician by training. He was a commander, a strategist, a man who dealt in systems and outcomes. But he had spent enough time around brilliant people to recognize the shape of something world-changing. "How bad?" he asked. Kevin took a breath. "The Velth stream keeps the Velthari aliens' neural network stable. Their architecture is dependent on it, not just culturally, but biologically. 6,000 years of evolution under the mandate has made the signal load-bearing. It's not just keeping them occupied, it's keeping them functional." He paused. "If you introduce a resonant disruptor at that harmonic, it wouldn't just interrupt the signal, it would cascade. Every neural network tuned to the Velth stream frequency would experience simultaneous recursive feedback." "In plain language," Nathan Cole said from across the table. Kevin looked at him. "Every Velthari alien in range would lose the ability to maintain coherent thought, instantly, simultaneously, without a single shot fired." The room was very quiet. He looked at Ryan Garrett, 26 years old, patent holder, sitting in the corner with a notepad full of recreational mathematics. "You found this," Dale said, "because you were bored." Ryan shrugged. "I find most things because I'm bored." Dale turned to face the viewport. Outside, the stars of Dominion space stretched in every direction. 400 systems, 2,000 worlds, 6,000 years of alien power built on the foundation of a signal that kept every mind in the galaxy from ever sitting still long enough to think dangerous thoughts. And a 26-year-old human specialist had cracked it open with a pencil because he had nothing better to do. "Don't write that down anywhere the Velthari aliens can find it," Dale said quietly. "Don't discuss it outside this room. Don't even think about it loudly." He turned back to face them. "We're going to need more math." What followed was the strangest 3 months in the history of human space exploration. On the surface, the USS Resolute continued its diplomatic tour of Dominion space, attending Velthari alien ceremonial functions, filing integration paperwork, submitting to the endless bureaucratic rituals of galactic membership. Dale smiled at High Coordinator Velserath. He attended briefings about Velt stream installation schedules. He signed forms. Underneath that surface, his crew did what humans do when they are isolated, understimulated, and left alone with a problem. They got creative. Marcus Webb, who described himself as an engineer, but who had always secretly been a mathematician in disguise, began working on the resonant disruptor concept from a hardware angle. He didn't need much. The USS Resolute already carried standard communications equipment capable of broadcasting on a wide range of frequencies. The modification required was subtle, precise, and as Marcus cheerfully noted, the kind of thing that looks completely innocent until it absolutely isn't. Dr. Aaron Finch, meanwhile, had discovered something fascinating in the Velthari alien language archives. The Velthari aliens had a word, Velthrak, that had no direct translation. The closest approximation was something like the dangerous silence, the state of a mind that had gone too long without stimulation. It appeared in their historical texts as a warning, a bogeyman, the thing that had caused the ancient rebellions that preceded the Mandate. They're afraid of it, Aaron told Dale, translating a 6,000-year-old Velthari alien philosophical text with the focused intensity of a man who had been awake for 30 hours and didn't care. Not just politically afraid, biologically afraid. The concept of prolonged silence, of a mind left alone with itself, it registers in their neurology as something close to existential terror. Dale absorbed this. And for us? Aaron smiled. For us, it's called a Sunday afternoon. Nathan Cole had spent the same 3 months doing something that looked from the outside like obsessive tactical planning, running simulations, drawing star maps, calculating travel times, and broadcast ranges across Dominion space. In reality, he was building something far more ambitious, a deployment architecture for a weapon that didn't exist yet, in a war that hadn't started yet, against an enemy that didn't know it was an enemy yet. If we wanted maximum simultaneous coverage, Nathan told Dale one evening, spreading his star maps across the table, we'd need relay points here, here, and here. 3 broadcast nodes, triangulated across the Dominion's core systems. The signal would cascade from there, each disrupted network becoming a secondary broadcaster, amplifying the effect outward. Dale studied the map. You're describing a chain reaction. I'm describing mathematics, Nathan said. The chain reaction is just what happens afterward. And through all of it, Ryan Garrett kept doing math. Not purposeful math, not strategic math. Just math. Filling notepads with equations the way other people doodle, following threads of logic wherever they led. Occasionally surfacing to say something like, oh, that's interesting, and showing Kevin a new equation that made Kevin go very quiet for a long time. It was Ryan who discovered that the resonant disruptor wouldn't just disrupt. At the right amplitude, sustained for the right duration, it would rewrite. The feedback loop, pushed past a certain threshold, would permanently alter the dependency architecture of a Velthari alien neural network, breaking the biological need for the Velth stream, freeing the mind to function independently. You could use it as a weapon, Ryan said, studying his own equation with the detached curiosity of a man examining an interesting rock. Or you could use it as a cure. Dale looked at him for a long time. Both, he said finally. We might need it to be both. Outside the viewport, a Velthari alien patrol cruiser drifted past, long, pale, elegant, bristling with weapons that had never needed to be fired in 6,000 years of unchallenged dominance. The patrol cruiser's crew had no idea that the small human diplomatic vessel they were lazily monitoring contained 5 bored men with notepads who had just quietly finished designing the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. They had no idea because bored humans were, to the Velthari alien mind, simply an inefficiency, a quirk, a minor biological malfunction awaiting correction. They were about to learn the difference between a malfunction and a revolution. The arrest came on a Tuesday. Not that Tuesday meant anything in Dominion space. The Velthari aliens ran on a 31-hour cycle and had no concept of weeks. But Dale always thought of it as a Tuesday, later, because it had that particular Tuesday quality, unexpected, inconvenient, and ultimately the thing that changed everything. High Coordinator Velserath came aboard the USS Resolute personally, which was unusual. She brought 6 Velthari alien security officers, which was alarming. She presented Dale with a data scroll, listing 17 violations of Mandate Integration Protocol, which was fabricated, Dale said, reading the scroll with the calm of a man who had been expecting something like this. The Dominion does not fabricate violations, Velserath said. Her 4 pale eyes were unreadable. Your crew has been observed conducting unauthorized analysis of proprietary Mandate technology. This constitutes interference with galactic social infrastructure. Under Dominion law, the USS Resolute is hereby impounded, and your crew is remanded to Holding Station Velketh pending review. Dale looked at her. Behind him he could feel his crew, Kevin, Marcus, Nathan, Aaron, Ryan, perfectly still, perfectly quiet. How long is the review process? Dale asked. Standard review is 45 days, Velserath said. For violations of this severity, it may be extended to 180. 6 months. 6 months in a Velthari alien holding station. Dale glanced back at his crew. Ryan Garrett caught his eye and gave the smallest possible shrug, the shrug of a man who was already wondering what kind of math he could do in a holding cell. Very well, Dale said, we'll comply. Holding Station Velketh was, by Velthari alien standards, quite comfortable. The cells were spacious. The environmental controls were precise, and the Velth stream signal was present at standard residential levels. A gentle, constant hum of alien engagement frequency, designed to keep detainees calm, occupied, and compliant. It did not work on humans. Dale noticed this within the first 6 hours. The Velth stream registered in his awareness as a faint background buzz, noticeable, slightly irritating, like a fluorescent light with a flicker, but it had no deeper effect. His mind remained exactly where he'd left it, alert, restless, and already working on the problem. He had been separated from his crew. Standard Velthari alien protocol: isolate, observe, process individually. He had a cell approximately 4 meters by 6 meters, a sleeping platform, a waste facility, and a food delivery slot. He had no communication devices. He had no data access. He had no tools. He had the chalk. Someone had left it, a standard marking tool used by the Velthari alien maintenance crew, forgotten in the corner of the cell, white, fat, the length of a finger. By human standards, completely useless. Dale picked it up. He stood at the cell wall for a long moment, chalk in hand, thinking. Then he started writing. Not strategy, not plans, just math, the way Ryan had taught him to think about it, following threads for the pleasure of following them, letting the equations go where they wanted to go. He started with the Velth stream frequency equations Ryan had sketched on the notepad. He worked forward from there, filling wall space with the leisurely focus of a man who had nowhere to be and nothing to lose. He didn't know at first that the Velthari aliens were watching. Velketh's observation system was passive, ambient sensors, nothing obtrusive, designed to monitor detainees' stress levels and ensure mandate compliance. The Velthari alien monitoring officer assigned to Dale's cell, a junior analyst named Velorath, had expected to observe the standard human stress response to isolation, agitation, followed by Velth stream compliance, followed by calm. Instead, the human picked up a piece of chalk and started writing on the wall. Velorath flagged it as unusual. Velorath's supervisor Veldarin came to look. Veldarin called High Coordinator Velserath. Within 12 hours there were 7 Velthari alien analysts standing outside Dale's cell, watching through the observation panel as the human filled his walls with equations, paused occasionally to stare into the middle distance, and then kept going. What is he doing? Velserath asked. Velorath consulted the translation algorithms. The markings appear to be mathematical notation. We are not certain of the specific discipline. It does not match any standard Dominion mathematical framework. Is he planning something? He appears to be. Velorath paused, searching for the right word. Playing. Velserath stared at the human through the observation panel. Dale Mercer stood with his back to them, chalk moving steadily across the wall, completely absorbed. Increase the Velth stream signal in his cell, Velserath said. Full residential saturation. The signal increased. Dale paused, rolled his neck like a man adjusting to a change in air pressure, and then kept writing. Velserath watched this for a very long time. He is not complying, she said. No High Coordinator, Velorath confirmed. He is not. How is that possible? Velorath was quiet for a moment. We believe, the analyst said carefully, that his mind is already occupied. Outside the cell, the most powerful alien empire in the known galaxy stared at a human being doing math for fun, and felt, for the first time in 6,000 years, something that their philosophers had promised the Mandate had permanently eliminated: unease. Meanwhile, in the 5 other cells of Holding Station Velketh, the rest of Dale's crew was doing exactly what humans do and left alone with nothing but their own minds and a problem they haven't solved yet. Marcus Webb had disassembled his boot heel purely out of curiosity and was examining the communication components inside with the focused attention of a man who had just realized something very interesting. Kevin Rhodes was writing equations in condensation on his cell wall with his fingertip, working through the resonant disruptor mathematics from memory, refining variables he hadn't had time to refine before the arrest. Nathan Cole was memorizing star maps, the ones he'd studied for 3 months now, committed to perfect recall, running deployment scenarios in his head with the patience of a chess player who doesn't mind that the game hasn't started yet. Aaron Finch was composing a message in 3 Dominion alien languages simultaneously, designed to be broadcast on the Velth stream frequency itself, a message that, if transmitted at the right moment, would be carried by the Mandate's own infrastructure to every mind in Dominion space. And Ryan Garrett, in the corner of his cell with a piece of broken food tray edge scratching against the floor, had finished the resonant disruptor equations entirely, all of them, the complete mathematical architecture of a weapon that could crack the Velthari alien empire open like an egg, and had moved on to something new. How to calibrate it, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a weapon of liberation. Targeted, controlled, capable of breaking the biological Velth stream dependency in a Velthari alien neural network without causing permanent harm. A cure delivered at the speed of mathematics. He scratched the last equation into the floor of his cell and stared at it for a long time. Then he smiled. 6 human beings, isolated in separate cells, cut off from each other and from every tool they owned, monitored by the full surveillance apparatus of the most advanced alien empire in the galaxy. 6 human beings who had just, independently and in parallel, finished building the weapon. The Velthari aliens had arrested them to stop them from thinking. It was the worst mistake in galactic history. The pieces came together on day 19. It happened in the exercise corridor, the 1 hour per day when Velketh protocol required detainees to move, for biological maintenance purposes. The Velthari aliens were meticulous about physical health. An unhealthy detainee was an administrative complication. So every morning, the 6 members of the USS Resolute crew were walked, single file, down a long corridor and back. The Velthari alien guards had never felt the need to prevent conversation during this period. Detainees were compliant. The Velth stream saw to that. They had not adjusted their protocol for humans. The conversation lasted 47 seconds. Walking single file, quiet voices. Dale at the front, Ryan at the back, passing information down the line in the flat, casual tone of people discussing the weather. 47 seconds. It was enough. Marcus had what they needed inside his boot heel, or rather what remained of it after 19 days of patient, meticulous, thoroughly bored modification. The Velthari alien communications infrastructure of Velketh was standard Dominion design. He had memorized the schematics from the technical documents the aliens had cheerfully provided during Earth's integration orientation. He knew exactly where the access node was. He knew exactly what modification was required. He needed 11 minutes alone with it. The Velthari aliens gave him 12. It was a routine thing, a maintenance period, a brief window when the monitoring protocol cycled through a diagnostic reset. 11 minutes and 40 seconds of reduced sensor coverage, every 72 hours, as regular as clockwork. Marcus had been counting. He moved fast and quiet, with the focused efficiency of a man who had spent 19 days doing nothing but think about this exact sequence of actions. The access node was behind a panel in the exercise corridor. Accessible, trusted, completely unguarded. Because in 6,000 years of the Mandate, no detainee had ever needed to be guarded from a communications relay. The modification took 9 minutes. Marcus was back in his cell before the sensors completed their diagnostic cycle. He had not built a transmitter. He hadn't needed to. He had done something far simpler and far more dangerous. He had tuned Velkath's existing communications array, the one the Velthari aliens used to manage internal station broadcasts, to a secondary harmonic frequency. The frequency Ryan had identified, the one that lived inside the Velth stream like a crack in cathedral stone. The array was now capable of broadcasting the resonant disruptor signal. All it needed was the mathematical sequence to drive it, which Ryan had finished on day 7, which Aaron had encoded into a format compatible with the Velth stream broadcast infrastructure, which Kevin had verified against the original equations, running the confirmation calculations from memory in his cell, using fingertip equations on a condensation-covered wall, which Nathan had integrated into a deployment timing sequence based on the station's operational cycle, identifying the exact window when maximum Velthari alien personnel would be within broadcast range, when the signal cascade would propagate most efficiently through the station's network and outward to the nearest relay nodes. 6 humans, 6 separate cells, 19 days, 1 weapon, assembled in pieces, passed in 47 seconds of corridor conversation, ready to fire. Dale lay on his sleeping platform the night before and stared at the ceiling and thought about what came next. Not the technical details, those were finished. What he thought about was the question Ryan had raised weeks ago, in a different context, in a different room, a weapon or a cure. The resonant disruptor at combat amplitude would cascade through every Velthari alien neural network within range, disrupting coherent thought, collapsing the Velth stream dependency architecture, leaving the Velthari aliens conscious but cognitively fractured, unable to coordinate, unable to command, unable to enforce the mandate. It would spread from Velketh, through the relay network, to the nearest core systems. It would hit thousands of Velthari aliens simultaneously. It would win. But Ryan's second equation, the precise calibration, the surgical frequency, did something different. At lower amplitude, targeted duration, it would break the dependency without the fracture. It would free the Velthari alien neural networks from their 6,000-year addiction to the Velth stream. It would leave them intact, functional, independent, and for the first time in 60 centuries, genuinely free. It would be slower, more complex. It required the Velthari aliens to not interfere while the signal did its work, which meant it required, at minimum, a moment of demonstrated power first. A proof. A signal that humanity was not asking permission. Dale made his decision. Both, he had told Ryan. He had meant it. At 0400 station time, when Velketh's operational cycle was at its lowest ebb, and the Velthari alien crew rotations had just turned over, Nathan Cole's timing sequence hit its window. Dale spoke 2 words to the ambient sensor in his cell, knowing the monitoring system would carry them instantly to every station in the network. Knowing the Velthari alien duty officer would hear them. Knowing that what happened next would be on record across Dominion space. Begin transmission, he said. Marcus's modified array activated. The resonant disruptor signal, Ryan Garrett's recreational mathematics, Kevin Rhodes's verified equations, Aaron Finch's encoded broadcast format, Nathan Cole's deployment timing, Marcus Webb's 11-minute hardware modification, Dale Mercer's decision, went out across holding station Velketh at combat amplitude. For exactly 4.7 seconds. Then Dale spoke again. Switch to therapeutic frequency. The signal shifted, dropped in amplitude, locked onto Ryan's second equation, the cure, the liberation, the mathematics of freedom delivered at the speed of light, through infrastructure the Velthari aliens had built themselves. In the monitoring center, Velserith felt it hit. It was not painful. That was the first thing she registered, in the half-second before her thoughts began to change. It was not painful, and it was not violent, and it was not anything like what she had expected from a weapon, because she had expected a weapon. Because every threat she had ever processed in 6,000 years of Dominion history had been a weapon. This felt like silence. Not empty silence. Not the terrifying Velthrak silence her neurology had been conditioned to fear. Something else. Something she had no word for, because the Velthari alien language had never needed one. The Velth stream was still there, the signal still hummed, the infrastructure still broadcast. But the dependency was gone. The architectural need, the biological hunger, the 6,000-year addiction, it was simply, cleanly, precisely absent. Like a splinter removed, like a noise stopped. Velseroth sat in the monitoring center, and for the first time in her life, heard the inside of her own mind. It was very quiet. And in that quiet, for the first time in 6,000 years, a Velthari alien asked herself a question that the mandate had been designed, above all else, to prevent. What do I actually think? The cascade moved faster than anyone had modeled. Ryan's equations had accounted for the relay network, the way the Velth stream infrastructure connected Velketh to the nearest core systems, the way a signal introduced at one node would propagate outward along the grid. What Ryan's equations had not fully accounted for was the sheer density of that network. The Velthari aliens had spent 6,000 years building and refining the Velth stream infrastructure until it covered every inhabited system in the Dominion with redundant, overlapping coverage. They had built, without knowing it, the perfect delivery system for their own liberation. The therapeutic signal rode the Velth stream relay network outward from Velkath like a wave moving through still water. System by system, world by world, touching every neural network tuned to mandate frequency, which was every Velthari alien neural network in the Dominion, because in 6,000 years, no Velthari alien had ever been born outside the signal's reach. High Coordinator Velserath was still sitting in Velkath's monitoring center, very still and very quiet, when the first reports began arriving from the outer stations. Not alarms, not emergency protocols, just reports. Filed by Velthari alien officers who had apparently decided independently to document what was happening to them, because documentation felt like the right response to something unprecedented. Signal anomaly detected, neural dependency architecture disrupted, cognitive function nominal, Velth stream dependency absent, requesting guidance. Signal cascade confirmed, personnel report altered cognitive baseline, no distress reported, awaiting orders. Velth stream dependency disruption confirmed across all personnel. Station operations continuing normally. Commander requests clarification on current mandate status. Velserath read the reports one by one. Around her, her staff sat at their stations, filing their own documentation, exchanging quiet observations in tones she had never heard from Velthari aliens before. Minds that had spent their entire existence skimming a gentle current, now suddenly in still water, discovering they could swim. She stood, walked to the holding cell corridor, and stopped in front of cell 7. Dale Mercer was sitting on his sleeping platform. The walls of his cell were covered, floor to ceiling, with chalk equations. He looked like a man who had slept well, and was mildly curious about what the day would bring. Velserath studied the equations on the walls. The translation algorithms in her neural implant struggled. The mathematical notation was human, non-standard, built on frameworks the Dominion had never encountered. What does it mean, she asked. Not as a demand, genuinely. The voice of a mind encountering something for the first time and wanting to understand it. Dale looked at the walls. Most of it is the resonant disruptor architecture, he said. The weapon, the cure. He paused. The last section is something I was working on for myself, a proof of something Ryan said early on, that I wanted to verify. What did he say? Dale was quiet for a moment. He said boredom is just what intelligence looks like when it's between problems. He looked at the equations. I was trying to prove it mathematically. I think I got close. Velserath looked at the walls for a long time. You did this, she said. This cascade, all of it, from a holding cell, with a piece of chalk. With math, Dale said. Recreational math, the kind you do when you have nothing better to do. We gave you nothing to do deliberately, Velserath said. To neutralize you. I know. We did not understand what we were doing. No, Dale said, you didn't. Velserath was quiet for a long time. In the monitoring center behind her, reports were still coming in. Thousands of them now. From dozens of systems. Velthari alien officers and administrators and citizens documenting their own liberation with the meticulous thoroughness of a species encountering genuine independent thought for the first time and finding it, cautiously, interesting. What happens now? Velserath asked. Dale stood up. That, he said, is entirely up to you. For the first time in 6,000 years. The next 72 hours were the strangest in the history of the Dominion. The Velthari alien empire did not collapse. That was the thing that surprised everyone, including privately, Dale. He had been prepared for chaos, for the power vacuum, for the desperate scrambling of a political structure suddenly deprived of its foundational control mechanism. He had contingency plans. Nathan had tactical overlays. Marcus had the array still configured for combat amplitude, if it became necessary. None of it became necessary. What happened instead was quieter and far more interesting. The Velthari alien administrative apparatus, freed from Velthstream dependency, simply kept working. Officers filed reports, supply chains continued, essential services operated, not out of compulsion, not out of Velthstream smoothed compliance, but because, as it turned out, most Velthari aliens had genuinely believed in the mandate's purpose and were quite capable of choosing to continue their duties when given the option. But the questions started. Slowly at first, careful, almost tentative, from administrators and officers who had spent their entire careers in a cognitive environment that never quite encouraged deep inquiry. And then faster, spreading through the Dominion's communication networks with the momentum of thought that had been waiting 6,000 years for an opening. Was the mandate still necessary? Had it ever been? What did the Dominion look like without it? What did they look like? The Velthari aliens, the Inari aliens, the Dross aliens, the Peluvian aliens, the Reth aliens, freed from the assumption that their minds required management. The Velthstream infrastructure was still active, but without the biological dependency. The signal was just noise, background hum, easy to ignore, losing its hold, system by system, as Velthari alien engineers, asking their own questions now, began quietly switching off the transmitters. High Coordinator Vel Sereth convened an emergency session of the Dominion Council on Day 3. Dale was invited to attend, not as a detainee, not as a diplomatic representative, but as something the Velthari alien language had no precise word for. A witness, a participant, the human who had handed the most powerful alien empire in the galaxy a mirror and stood back to see what they did with it. The council chamber was vast, designed for a species that communicated in layered harmonics as much as language, with curved walls that caught and redirected sound, and seating arrangements that gave every member equal visual access to every other. Dale sat at the edge of the chamber and watched 200 senior Velthari aliens conduct, for the first time, a genuinely open debate. It was long. It was complicated. There were moments of confusion, moments of strong disagreement, moments where the translator in Dale's ear struggled to keep up with the speed and density of 6,000 years of suppressed political thought suddenly finding expression. It was, Dale thought, beautiful. Aaron Finch leaned over to him at one point. The crew had been reunited, their ship released, their violations quietly struck from the record, and whispered, "They've been waiting to have this argument for 60 centuries. They just didn't know it." Dale nodded. He was watching Vel Sereth, who was speaking in measured, careful tones about the nature of governance and consent, arguments she had clearly been building in her newly quiet mind for 72 straight hours. "They're going to be fine," Dale said. "Better than fine," Kevin said from his other side. "They're going to be interesting." The formal renegotiation of humanity's relationship with the Dominion took 11 months. Dale was present for most of it, patient, prepared, occasionally bored in the constructive way that had started all of this. His crew rotated through in shifts, each of them contributing to the process in ways that reflected what they'd been doing in those holding cells. Kevin refining the therapeutic signal protocol so it could be offered, voluntarily, to any Dominion species that wanted to break their Velthstream dependency. Marcus upgrading the broadcast infrastructure to make the signal accessible on request. Aaron working with Velthari alien linguists to develop vocabulary for concepts the Dominion language had never needed. Silence, stillness, the productive emptiness of a mind between problems. Nathan consulting with Dominion military commanders on the security implications of an empire whose control mechanism had just been quietly made optional. Ryan mostly doing math. The agreement they reached was not perfect. Nothing involving 6,000 years of history and 400 star systems ever is. But it was genuine, negotiated between minds that were, for the first time on both sides, fully present in the room. Humanity would not receive the Velthstream. The mandate was formally suspended, pending a Dominion-wide review of its necessity. Any species within the Dominion that wished to receive the therapeutic signal, the liberation frequency, some were calling it, could request it through the new Human-Dominion Joint Commission, Any species that preferred to remain on the Velth stream could do so. The dependency architecture could be maintained voluntarily in those who wanted it. Freedom, it turned out, included the freedom to choose your own relationship with stillness. Vel Serac signed the agreement herself. She had in 11 months of genuine political thought become something the Dominion had not produced in 6,000 years. A reformer. Not a revolutionary. She had no interest in tearing down what existed, but a thoughtful, systematic, occasionally frustrated political leader who was actively rebuilding her civilization's relationship with its own mind. She had also in those 11 months developed what she described as a tolerance for mathematical notation on walls. Her office at Dominion Council headquarters had a section of blank wall near her desk. She was thinking. On the day the USS Resolute prepared to return to Earth, Dale stood in the docking bay of Velthari Station Prime and looked out at the stars. It was quiet. Not the suppressed quiet of the Velth stream, not the managed, maintained, politically enforced quiet of a galaxy told that silence was dangerous. Just the natural quiet of space, vast and indifferent and full of possibility. Kevin appeared beside him, coffee in hand. Real coffee. Someone had figured out the replicator settings. Ready to go home? Almost, Dale said. He was thinking about the chalk equations. The walls of Cell 7 in Holding Station Velketh, covered floor to ceiling, with the mathematical proof of something Ryan had said that he'd wanted to verify. Boredom is just what intelligence looks like between problems. He had gotten close to proving it. Not all the way. The last section had unresolved variables, threads he hadn't followed to their ends. He'd run out of wall space. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket, a real one, paper, the kind he'd carried since his first command. He opened it to the last page he'd written on and looked at the unfinished equations. Then he turned to the next blank page and started writing. Kevin watched this for a moment. What are you working on? Something I haven't finished yet, Dale said, not looking up. What is it? Dale considered the question. Outside, the stars of the galaxy stretched in every direction. Hundreds of inhabited systems, thousands of worlds, species ancient and new, minds that were slowly, cautiously, beginning to ask questions they had never been permitted to ask. The Velth stream was going quiet, system by system, transmitter by transmitter, as the Dominion dismantled 6,000 years of managed silence and let the actual silence in. In the actual silence, things grew. Questions, ideas, the slow movements of genuine thought, mathematics done for no reason except the pleasure of following a thread to see where it led. I'm not sure yet, Dale said honestly. That's why I'm still working on it. He kept writing. Around him the galaxy breathed, vast, political, ancient, and changing. The Inari aliens were filing petitions for self-governance review. The Reth aliens had formed an independent philosophical council, the first in their recorded history. The Peluvian aliens had produced, in 8 months of genuine intellectual freedom, 17 new scientific papers and 1 piece of music that the Velthari Alien Council had unanimously described as unprecedented and somewhat alarming in its emotional complexity. The Dross aliens were doing math. Nobody had taught them, nobody had assigned it. They had simply, in the quiet of their newly independent minds, discovered the pleasure of following a thread, of sitting with a problem, turning it over, finding its edges, following it somewhere unexpected. They had filled their public spaces with equations, the way other species fill them with art, which was, Dale reflected, essentially what equations were anyway. He wondered if Ryan knew. He probably did. Ryan had a way of knowing things before they became obvious. Behind him, the crew of the USS Resolute finished their pre-departure checks with the efficient quiet of people who had been through something large together and had processed most of it and were ready, now, for whatever came next. Marcus secured the engineering bay and thought about the modification he had made to Velketh's communications array, the 11-minute job that had changed galactic history, and decided that it would make an excellent chapter in the technical memoir he had been meaning to write for years. He started composing the opening line in his head as he worked. Nathan ran final tactical checks and thought about the star maps he had memorized and the deployment architecture he had designed for a war that hadn't quite happened, and the strange satisfaction of a plan that had worked better than planned because it had turned into something else entirely. Aaron filed the last of the diplomatic documentation and thought about words. Specifically, the new words the Velthari alien language was developing, for concepts it had never needed before. Veltharak had meant the dangerous silence. They were working on a new word now, something for the productive silence, the quiet in which minds move and grew. They didn't have it yet. Aaron had offered 3 suggestions. The Velthari alien linguists were thinking it over. Kevin drank his coffee and thought about the therapeutic signal and how it was already spreading voluntarily through Dominion space, touching minds that chose to receive it, and how the mathematics of liberation turned out to be, at its core, quite beautiful, elegant in the way that true things tend to be elegant, once you find the right angle on them. Ryan was already on the ship. He had been there for 2 hours. He was doing math. Dale finished the page he was working on. He studied the equations for a moment. There were still unresolved variables. There would probably always be unresolved variables, because that was the nature of problems worth working on. But the shape of the answer was clearer now. He could see where the thread was going. He closed the notebook. "Let's go home," he said. He walked toward the ship. Behind him, Velthari Station Prime hummed with the activity of a civilization in the middle of the most significant political transformation in 6,000 years. Alive with genuine debate, genuine conflict, genuine thought. Not the smooth-surfaced productivity of the mandate, but something messier and more honest and far more interesting. The USS Resolute undocked cleanly, turned its nose toward the long dark between stars, and began the journey home. Dale sat in the commander's chair and opened his notebook to the page he'd been working on. The stars stretched ahead. Each one a system, each system a world, each world a collection of minds now being given, one by one, the same thing humanity had always taken for granted. The right to sit quietly with themselves, the right to be bored, the right to pick up a piece of chalk. He wrote for a while. The ship was quiet around him, the crew settled into the easy rhythms of a long transit, each person doing whatever they did in the spaces between events. Kevin reading, Marcus tinkering, Nathan running hypotheticals, Aaron drafting, Ryan calculating. Humanity between problems, doing what humanity does. After a while, Ryan appeared in the doorway of the command room. He looked at the notebook in Dale's hands. "Did you finish it?" Ryan asked. Dale looked at the page. The last variable, the one that had been unresolved since the walls of Cell 7, was finally, cleanly, precisely solved. He had found it somewhere in the quiet of the docking bay, in the space between one thought and the next. "Yeah," he said. "I finished it." Ryan nodded, satisfied. "What does it prove?" Dale thought about it. He thought about a 26-year-old specialist with a notepad and nothing to do. He thought about chalk on a cell wall. He thought about a cascade of liberation riding an empire's own infrastructure outward through 400 star systems. He thought about the Dross aliens doing math in their public squares, and a Velthari alien reformer with a blank wall in her office that she was still thinking about. "It proves," Dale said, "that intelligence doesn't stop when the stimulation does. It just goes somewhere else." He paused. Somewhere the people trying to manage it can't follow. Ryan considered this. "That's a good proof," he said. "It's a start," Dale said. He turned to the next blank page. Outside, the galaxy continued. Vast, political, ancient, and no longer quiet in the managed way it had been. Loud, now, with the noise of minds freely moving. Loud with questions and arguments and music of unexpected emotional complexity, and equations written on walls, and the beautiful, dangerous, unstoppable sound of intelligence between problems. Finding the next one. If this story hit different, if you felt that moment when the chalk met the wall, drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have written? Share this with someone who needs to hear that boredom isn't a weakness. And if you haven't subscribed to HFY Endurance Tales yet, what are you waiting for? More stories like this one are coming. And trust us, you don't want to miss what's next.